As I've been saying, we're going to do a chapter or two from Psalm. I had given Dave Psalm chapter 5, and as I looked at it, actually the next three Psalms are fairly similar, and I'm actually going to read 5 and 6 here, because these both deal with a prayer for protection or mercy in times of trouble, or in dealing with wicked people. So the first one, the header in my Bible says, prayer for protection from the wicked, for the choir director, from flute accompaniment, a psalm of David. Give ear to my words, O Lord, consider my groaning. Heed the sound of my cry for help, my King and my God, for to thee do I pray. In the morning, O Lord, thou wilt hear my voice. In the morning I will order my prayer to thee and eagerly watch. For thou art not a God who takes pleasure in wickedness, no evil dwells with thee. The boastful shall not stand before thine eyes. Thou dost hate all who do iniquity. Thou dost destroy those who speak falsehood. The Lord abhors the man of bloodshed and deceit. But as for me, by thine abundant loving kindness I will enter thy house. At thy holy temple I will bow in reverence for thee. O Lord, lead me in thy righteousness because of my foes. Make thy way straight before me. There is nothing reliable in what they say. Their inward part is destruction itself. Their throat is an open grave. They flatter with their tongue. Hold them guilty, O God. By their own devices let them fall. In the multitude of their transgressions thrust them out, for they are rebellious against thee. But let all who take refuge in thee be glad. Let them ever sing for joy, and mayest thou shelter them, that those who love thy name may exult in thee. For it is thou who dost bless the righteous man, O Lord. Thou dost surround him with favor as with a shield. And we talked about that. You know, David in several Psalms is praying for protection and glorifying God. And, you know, think about what was happening with David. Certainly he did become king, and he had some of the advantages of being king, but throughout a lot of his life, what was going on? War and turmoil. Yeah, a lot of struggle, a lot of war, a lot of problems. So I think David's a good example for, you know, that the circumstances that are going on around us aren't necessarily the blessings that were, it's not a blessing of lack of turbulence or everything being perfect or anything like that. He's talking about knowing that God is with us, and that we have the spiritual blessings because we have God on our side, and we can have that peace. Then chapter 6, a prayer for mercy in the time of trouble. O Lord, do not rebuke me in thine anger, nor chasten me in thy wrath. Be gracious to me, O Lord, for I am pining away. Heal me, O Lord, for my bones are dismayed, and my soul is greatly dismayed. But thou, O Lord, how long? Return, O Lord, rescue my soul. Save me because of thy loving kindness. For there is no mention of thee in death, and Sheol who will give thee thanks. I am weary with my sighing. Every night I make my bed swim. I dissolve my couch with my tears. My eye has wasted away grief. It has become old because of all my adversaries. Depart from me, all you who do iniquity, for the Lord has heard the voice of my weeping. The Lord has heard my supplication. The Lord receives my prayer. All my enemies shall be ashamed and greatly dismayed. They shall turn back. They shall suddenly be ashamed. All right, so anyway, like I said, we're going to do that and read a chapter or two from Psalm at the beginning of our lessons before we get into our main topic for this series, which is going to be Revelation. So, as most of you know, there's a lot of confusion regarding the book of Revelation throughout the Christian churches. And the cause of that confusion, I think, is that Revelation is different from any other New Testament book. How is it different? The language used in it is symbolic. Is there anywhere else in the Bible that we see symbolic language? Yep. What are some examples? Well, I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm going to get to this in a little bit, but what are some examples of symbolic language in other places of the Bible?
Yeah, a lot in Daniel.
Daniel?
A lot of symbolism.
a lot in the prophets in general, right? There's, like, if you go through, Daniel is definitely where there's a huge comparison between Daniel and Revelation, but there's other prophets, at least parts of other books in the Old Testament that have prophecies that are done with symbols. What else? All right, well, I'll let you think about that because there's other places that we'll come across that as we go. So what other ways is it different?
It's the only New Testament book that focuses primarily on prophetic events.
Yep, that's very true. I guess you could say that some of Paul's epistles and some of the prophecies that Jesus gives in the Gospels would relate to his second coming, right? Which would still be prophetic. But as far as the general theme, it's the only book in the New Testament that's prophetic for that. So yeah, that's certainly a difference. Anything else? Nope. All right. What was that? Was that a reverb? All right, we're good. So anyway, the way that that's really basically the main differences that I came up with. There probably are some others that we could go over, but the way I intend to teach this series is first to just do the normal things that I would do in going into any study of any book of the Bible, kind of like what we did with Job. So we're going to talk about who wrote the book, when was it written, who was it written to, why was it written, what was its purpose, and that'll give us a good jumping point to then discuss different methods of interpretation, because as we said, it's prophetical, and it's also uses imagery, so there's lots of different interpretations of it. And that's, of course, where most of the debate about the book comes into play. And then we'll go through several lessons discussing the meaning of the symbols and the visions. So we're not going to go chapter by chapter first. We're going to kind of cover symbols and those kind of things. And then finally, we will go back and go through chapter by chapter, but I would anticipate that that won't be a very long endeavor, relatively speaking anyway, in that we will have already covered the symbols kind of as we're going through the first few lessons here. Okay, I'll be using several different sources in this study. I personally don't have any expertise in Revelation, so most everything beyond just reading the material is going to come from different sources. So some of those sources that we're going to go through, or that I'll be using, Steve Rook taught one of the best series of lessons on Revelation, at least in relation to the symbols and those things, back in 1995 in Trenton, Tennessee. So I happened to be there during that time and was able to hear those lessons and was able to get some of the notes for them. So I'll use those pretty heavily in the first few lessons dealing with the symbols and those things, once we get through the introduction material here. Also, some other materials that I'll be using. Well, first off, there may be some things that come up as I go. I never know what I'm going to come across and find as we're doing this. But as far as the baseline, I have some material that I took out of a class by Sam Hester that was at Freed-Hardeman University in 1995. So I have some of those materials. Also have a commentary by John Hines, which is in the New Testament Commentaries series. That was published in 1989, but I think he actually wrote the commentary in 1937, so it's pretty old as far as we're concerned here. There's also a book called Revelation, and that's in the looking. There's probably lots of books called Revelation, actually, but this one is in the series Looking into the Bible series, and that was written by Jim McGuigan in 1976. I also have a Charles Ryrie study Bible that I use from time to time. Now then, as I'm going through these and giving you guys what material I'm looking at, that does not mean, anything that I'm using here doesn't mean that I'm promoting it as being truth or accurate in any way. In fact, when it comes to Charles Ryrie, probably the only thing I agree with him on is the history. Like, I use him for the history of stuff, because most of anything else where he's given an opinion, I usually am like, I don't like that. I don't agree with that. So I'm not saying that these materials are like things that would be necessarily good. Some of them are, some of them aren't, but they're not necessarily things that I would point to for accuracy or things like that. It's just, these are the materials that I'll refer to or use. But each of these resources is written obviously by a different person, from a different time in many cases, and also from different points of view as to the interpretation of the book, or they provide information into the different interpretations of the book. So I think it's a pretty good cross-section or smattering of what people believe, so that we can discuss it as we go through this. Through this study. It's also interesting because some of these have age on them to see what was being said about it back at that time versus what you might say now, or where these things are going. So we'll kind of bring that out as we go along through here too. All right, so there are several important things that I want to note as we begin this topic. And the first thing is just a question: why study Revelation? How does it apply to us today?
Well, you have letters to the 7 churches.
Letters to the 7 churches.
As with all Scripture, there are lessons to be learned from it.
Yep, for sure. Any inspired Scripture that is in the Bible is there for a reason, right? And it's something to be learned from. So I would say it's in God's Word. It's clearly an inspired book, and actually it's the last inspired book that we have, right? Unless some people try to attach an earlier date to it, but we'll get into that here in a little bit. But for the most part, I think most everybody agrees that it would be the last of the books written. Okay, what else? How else might it? Why is it important, and how might it apply to us?
God told us what the beginning was going to be through Genesis. He's telling us through Revelation what's going to happen at the end.
Okay. I might say that a little bit of a different way. I would say that the Revelation part, I would say God says that blessed are those who read and keep the things written in it. So, yeah, it's kind of the conclusion to the beginning in what was said in Genesis. So I think that's certainly a good reason to look at it. What else? Well, the obvious thing, people are interested in it, right? It's a pretty interesting topic. There's graphic imagery, language, and some people like it for the mystery that's in it. Also, many people believe that it's filled with prophecies that are still being fulfilled or coming. We'll talk about that as we go through the series here. But so you get all the discussions about, well, what does this mean and what does that mean and all of that kind of stuff. So we need to have some knowledge base for when people are talking about this, right? And along with that, people need to know how to interpret it. Confusion about what is being said is not a good reason for us to avoid it. Like, it's not good to just say, well, it's difficult to understand, so we just shove it off to the side. So that's a good reason to look into it and to study it, right? Also, the church needs to hear its call. That means that we need, there's a message in Revelation, as you were saying, that we need to know about, and we need to hear it. There's a lot of good lessons in Revelation. In fact, it provides strong teaching against materialism and in living for the things in this world only. It goes back to the thing that I like to talk about a lot, like not focusing just on the things here, but realizing that we need to have an eternal perspective, and that it's the spiritual that's the most important. It provides hope for the suffering. A lot of going back and forth between suffering and then victory in Revelation. So it provides hope for the suffering and oppressed and assures that good will win out. So I think that all of those things are important and good reasons to study the book. Second thing that we need to note here, as we were just mentioning, there are some things that are very difficult to interpret in Revelation, and there are lots of disagreements about what is being said and taught. So as we go through this study, I don't intend to get into every little detail of the book and try to nail down every symbol or what this is saying or anything like that. However, I don't think that you can teach Revelation without kind of talking a little bit about what your opinion is and giving some thoughts. So I'll tell you what I think is being said based on what I read in the Scripture and what the studying that I've done, at least in certain main areas. And I'm guessing that some of you, no, I'm not guessing, I know that some of you will not agree with everything the way that I say it. Now, in this audience, I don't know how much disagreement there will be, but I certainly, like if you look at it across all the different interpretations and everything that's out there, is a lot of disagreement, a lot of different teaching. So, I don't think any two people are going to see everything in the same way as we go through the book. So, with that being said, I want to have the discussion. I don't claim to be, like I said, I don't claim to be an expert, so I want to hear what other people say, but I also don't want to go down a rabbit hole, so we'll try to balance discussion on things with getting to our point and getting through. So if anybody, like if I cut somebody off, I try not to cut people off, but if I say, that's enough right now, if you feel like we need to talk about it with me some more, and maybe we can come back and have it in a good way the next week, like talk about it more next week whenever we're prepared for the discussion or whatever. But like I said, I don't want to get down where we're just going back and forth on different opinions or different things and just getting stuck at a place. So that's kind of going to be, that's the way I'll try to cover it. Elton?
So, I know that my daughter's favorite verse is Revelation 21:8.
Yep, because we've all heard that. Well, maybe we haven't all heard. Most of us have heard that song, right, from Revelation 21:8. I'm not going to sing it here, but yeah, we're familiar with that. So, also along with that, and I'll emphasize this more later, but I don't think we have to have everything right when it comes to Revelation. Like, there's a lot of people. I'd like to focus on the main themes of Revelation more so than if somebody had. There's a few erroneous doctrines out there that are pretty important that we need to probably address and make sure that we're not going down that road, because I think it could impact the way somebody behaves and those kind of things. But as far as having the wrong view of something, first off, who am I to say whether somebody's completely right or not? Who are we to say that? And then also, so we all probably have things that we may not have the exact right view on. But overall, we want to get the main theme from the book and what it's talking about, and make sure that we're not going down the wrong path on that. But beyond that, like I said, I don't want to spend too much time getting into the nitty-gritty details on a lot of the things. Another important thing that we need to make sure that we lay out here, Revelation references the Old Testament quite a bit. I think there are several Old Testament books that should be read in conjunction with Revelation and that we need to be at least familiar with. One of them that people often don't even talk about is Genesis. There's a lot of correlation back and forth between Genesis and Revelation. But the ones that we're most familiar with, probably Daniel, Isaiah, Micah, Zephaniah, and maybe even Jeremiah, you has some things that you can link to it. And we'll read certain sections of these books as we go through the study. And I would encourage anybody who wants to be serious about studying Revelation to go back and go through at least those books in the Old Testament, as we get into this. Let's see. And of course, like Jimmy mentioned right away whenever we asked about symbolic language, Daniel is often like I said, the most important and the one that's most combined with revelation and interpretation the most there. Fourth, and the last thing that I'll say here as far as what some important things before we get into this, is that many people believe that revelation can't be understood because of the visions and language used, as we've been talking about. The use of apocalyptic speech causes many people confusion. So first off, what is apocalyptic speech?
It means something that's been revealed.
Been revealed?
That's the point, it's been revealed.
It's been revealed, yep.
The word apocalypse means the revealing.
Right, and first, apocalyptic is not a Bible word, is it? I don't think I ever saw it in the Bible.
It's a Greek word. It means to reveal.
Right, to reveal. So it's a word that we, people, have attached to this to explain what it is. So yeah, it's what it's used as nowadays is it's to denote, excuse me, scripture made up of symbols or figurative language meant to reveal something. We're usually prophetic, right?
Well, in modern terminology, we use it for the end of the world.
Oh yeah, so yeah, the apocalypse, yeah, like you know, if you ever watch movies, sometimes there's a post-apocalyptic time. That's where, you know, after the modern world is destroyed or whatever. So yeah, that's how we use it today. But what it's referring to when we're talking about it here is just basically imagery, language using imagery to convey some kind of a prophecy or a revelation. What is it usually used in regards to in the Bible?
Isn't it more spiritual warfare, the stuff that we can't see that goes on around us?
I don't think that that's how I would interpret it usually, as far as what the apocalyptic language, well, at least the visual imagery language, especially when it sounds like it's referring to the end of the world kind of language, I think is generally in the Old Testament is referring to the destruction of Jerusalem, for the most part. It's not. If it's not the destruction of Jerusalem, it's at least a major world-changing event, something that's going to be impactful. Now, then that may not be from the world's viewpoint. Like, was the destruction of Jerusalem a major world-changing event as far as the world goes? Maybe, maybe not. But as far as the Jewish nation and God's people, pretty significant, right? That was a huge event. So whenever you're talking about that kind of language, I think it's more referring to a major event, and generally in the Old Testament leading up to the destruction of Jerusalem. All right. Is all speech that uses symbols apocalyptic?
No.
No. Do you have an example?
Of Jesus and the parables.
Yep. So yeah, Jesus taught in parables, and parables use symbols or visual things for us. But what were Jesus' parables? What did they do?
Taught lesson.
Yeah, it's using. I think that may be what you guys were talking about there. Using something that we know, something physical, to illustrate a spiritual lesson, right? So that's what Jesus' symbols were. And I wouldn't consider that to be apocalyptic speech. Like we just talked about, apocalyptic speech is dealing with some kind of a major world-changing event. But Jesus does use apocalyptic speech, and in one place in particular, and that's where we're going to focus today. And we're going to do this. We're going to go through the section where Jesus is talking about the destruction of Jerusalem in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21. So I bet you guys thought we were going to get into Revelation today, but we're not touching Revelation yet. Let's see. Okay, so as I've covered this in another lesson, I don't remember how long ago it was or what that lesson was exactly, but many people think that Jesus is talking about signs to come before his return when you look in Matthew 24 and these other chapters. I actually think that he's talking about signs to come before the destruction of Jerusalem. So we're going to read these passages and see which of the two events you think Jesus is talking about would impact your interpretation of when the signs are to happen and what those signs would be, and to also kind of get us familiar with this kind of language before we actually dive into the book of Revelation. So, Dave, are you ready to do a lot of reading? All right, so we're going to start off, we're going to read, you got to read the whole chapter here, Matthew 24, and then we'll talk about that a little bit, and we're also going to read Luke 21. I'm going to skip Mark because Mark kind of combines the two. There's a little bit of different information in Mark, but we're not going to read 3 chapters on the same thing all at once here. So we're just going to cover Matthew 24 and then Luke 21. So, Dave, if you're able to read Matthew 24 for us.
Yes, Jesus foretells the destruction of the temple. Jesus left the temple and was going away when his disciples came to point out to him the buildings of the temple. But he answered them, "You see all these, don't you? Do you not? Truly, I say to you, there will not be left. They will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down." As he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be, and what will the signs of your coming and the end of the age?" And Jesus answered them, "See that no one leads you astray, for many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and they will lead many astray. And you will hear the wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, and the end is not yet." Why is it not rolling here? Hold on. There we go. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are but the beginning of the birth pains. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And there will be many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another. And many false prophets will arise and lead many astray, because the lawlessness will be increased. The love of many will grow cold, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. And the gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, let the reader understand, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let the one who is on the house step not go down and take what is in the house, and let the one who is in the field not turn back and take his cloak. And alas, for women who are pregnant and for those who are nursing infants in those days. Pray that your flight may not be in winter or on a Sabbath, for then there will be the great tribulation, such has not been from the beginning of the world until now, no, never will be. And if those days not be cut short, no human being would be saved. I'm having trouble here moving, okay. For then there will be a great tribulation, such as then not from the beginning, but those until now will never be. And those days will not be cut short, no human being will be saved. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. Then if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or there he is, do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will arise and perform great signs and wonders, so as to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you beforehand. So if they say to you, look, he is in the wilderness, do not go out. If they say, look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe. For the lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west. So will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever the corpse is, there our vultures will gather. Immediately after the tribulation, those days the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see that the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send out his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. From the fig tree learn its lessons. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts out its leaf, you know that the summer is near. So when you see all these things, you will know that he is near at the very gates. Come on, roll. There we go. So also you will see that these things, you will know that he is near. Truly I say to you, the generation will not pass until all these things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But concerning that day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. For as were the days of Noah, so were the coming of the Son of Man. For in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day when Noah entered the ark, and they were unaware until the flood came and swept them away. So will be the coming of the Son of Man. Then the two men will be in the field, one will be taken, and one left. The woman will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and one left. Therefore I stay awake, for you do not know of what day the Lord is coming. But know this, that if the master of the house had known in part that the night thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would have not let the house be broken into. Therefore, you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at the hour that you do not expect. When then is the faithful and wise servant whom his master set over his household to give them their food at proper time? Blessed is the servant who his master will find so doing when he comes. Truly I say to you, he will set him over all possessions. But if that wicked servant says to himself, my master is delayed, and begins to beat his fellow servants and eats and drinks with drunkards, the master of that servant will come on the day when he does not expect him, and at the hour he did not know, and will cut him into pieces and put him with the hypocrites. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
All right, thanks, Dave. That was one of the longest readings we've ever gone through here in one shot. All right, so I wanted just to read that whole thing because it's all one big discussion and important. There's a lot of important points. But the first thing is just, what do the disciples come and ask Jesus? And it's important to understand what these questions are. They say, tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? Now then, I'm not even totally sure how to tell you what I think on a little bit of that. Like, the first one's pretty clear, right? When will these things be? Well, what are they talking about? What Jesus just said, right? That there won't be one stone left on another. So that's a question about when's the temple going to be destroyed, right? The second one, what will be the sign of your coming? Well, what are the disciples talking about there? What's the signs of his coming? When? Where? What? What are they asking?
My opinion.
Yeah, opinion's good here.
Okay. They're not looking for the spiritual return of Jesus after the resurrection. They're looking for his triumphal entry into Jerusalem to take control.
I think that's possible. That certainly could be one thing that they're asking, because we see, let me make sure that I'm right on this. Well, I'm not totally sure, so I won't say that. But I think even after this discussion, the disciples are ask him about about his coming, like his kingdom. I believe that's the case. This may be the last part where it's mentioned, but I think that's the case. But anyway, we know that they were thinking he was going to establish a physical kingdom here. We know that. So that could be where they're coming from on this, right? So to clarify that a little bit, what end of the age are they referring to when they say end of an age? Once again, I don't know that anybody knows exactly, but what do you think they're referring to?
I think like what they're going through presently in their experience.
Through
the Roman occupation.
yeah, the current, yeah, the end of this age of what we're dealing with right now. Certainly a possibility. I mean, now it is also possible that maybe they had a moment of spiritual enlightenment and we're talking about his second coming, but I don't think so. But that's what most people attach this to, right? Is that Jesus in these answers is giving an answer to when he's returning for the second time.
Well, there's a few key phrases here in there. It says, but concerning the day and the hour, no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only.
Right, so Jesus actually takes their question, assuming that we're right, that they're asking about the end of the current Roman occupation and stuff. He takes their question, and eventually, and that's important to say, because he starts off answering their first question. That's the first thing. But then the second part, he actually takes their question and answers it in the reality of what's going to happen, not the way they asked it. So yeah, whether they, like I said, whether they had a moment of clarity and were actually asking the right question or not, Charles doesn't think so. But even if they weren't asking the right question, Jesus takes it and answers it in that way, in the correct way. When are you coming back? And he answers it. But he doesn't answer it at first. And that's where a lot of confusion comes, because a lot of people think, and you'll see why as we go through this, and I didn't leave enough time for this at all. You'll see as we go down through this, that he's, where many people think he starts talking about the end of the world, he's talking about the end of Jerusalem, the end of the Jewish nation. And we'll see that as we go through here. I didn't leave enough time for that. I was thinking we'd get through Matthew, so we'll pick up there. I won't make Dave read the whole thing again next week. We'll pick up and talk about it next week and go on from there. But so that's where we're headed. We're going to talk through Matthew, this particular discourse of Jesus and what he's saying, and then we're going to get into the real introduction to Revelation.